I stand outside my childhood home, diploma hidden in my car, heart racing. After 3 years of being excluded from family gatherings for dropping out of college to chase pipe dreams, my mother still believes I'm a failure. She doesn't know about Harvard Law, the scholarships, or the prestigious firm waiting for me in Boston. Today at Thanksgiving, my Aunt Patricia has promised to bring my framed diploma as a surprise. My palms sweat as I knock, wondering if reconciliation is possible, or if this will only deepen the divide. The crisp November air bites at my ears as I wait for someone to answer the door. This two-story colonial in our small Connecticut town hasn't changed a bit. Still pristine, with its freshly painted shutters and perfectly trimmed hedges. Just like my mother, Amanda Wilson, demanded perfection in her home. She expected nothing less from her children. Growing up as the second son meant living in the shadow of my older brother Garrett. He was the golden child, captain of the debate team, valedictorian, and eventual Yale graduate. I was smart too, but my interests pulled me in different directions. While my mother pushed calculus textbooks my way, I found myself lost in novels and writing short stories. She would scoff at my creative pursuits, calling them nice hobbies but not serious career material. "Wyatt, when will you start applying yourself?" became her constant refrain through my teenage years. "Look at your brother. He knows what it takes to succeed." What she never told us, but I later learned from my father Thomas during a rare heart-to-heart, was that my mother had once dreamed of becoming a doctor. Her own parents couldn't afford to send her to medical school, so she settled for being an office manager at a local medical practice. Her unfulfilled ambitions became the burden her sons would carry. "Your future is in business," she declared when I was 16, mapping out my entire academic journey through an MBA. "That's where the security is. That's where you'll make something of yourself." I tried to follow her blueprint. I really did. I enrolled at State University as a business major, telling myself I could learn to love spreadsheets and profit margins. The first year went reasonably well, solid B+ average, joined the business fraternity, even secured an internship at a local bank for the summer. My mother actually smiled at me during my freshman year holiday break. "You're finally getting serious," she said, patting my shoulder with rare approval. But during my sophomore year, I took an elective in constitutional law. Something clicked. The professor, Dr. Abernathy, noticed my passion and encouraged me to consider law school. For the first time, I could envision a future that excited me and still met the standard of a real career my mother might approve of. When I approached her with the idea of switching majors to pre-law, the temperature in the room plummeted. "Absolutely not. Lawyers are a dime a dozen, and most struggle to find decent work. You've finally found your footing in business. Don't throw it away on a whim." I should have stood my ground then, but years of seeking her approval had conditioned me to retreat. So I continued in business, growing more miserable each semester. My grades began to slip. I started skipping classes to sit in on law lectures. By junior year, I was failing 2 core business courses and excelling only in my legal studies elective. The breaking point came during Christmas dinner my junior year. The table was laden with holiday dishes, my mother's immaculate glazed ham, sweet potato casserole, and her famous cranberry relish that took 3 days to prepare. Perfection, as always. My father carved while Garrett regaled us with stories of his new executive position. My mother beamed with pride. "And what about your classes, Wyatt?" she eventually asked, her expectant smile already fading as if she sensed my answer wouldn't meet her standards. Perhaps it was the weight of pretending for so long, or maybe it was just the contrast between Garrett's genuine enthusiasm for his work and my own misery, but something in me snapped. "I'm dropping out," I said, placing my fork down with deliberate calm. "Business isn't for me. Never was." The silence was absolute. My father froze mid-carve. Garrett stared at his plate. "You're what?" My mother's voice was deadly quiet. "I'm dropping out. I've already submitted the paperwork. I'm going to take some time to figure out what I really want to do." I hadn't actually filed anything yet, but in that moment, I knew I would. What I didn't say was that I had already begun researching law school applications. My mother's face transformed from shock to rage to a cold, frightening calm. "After everything we've invested in you, after all our sacrifices, this is how you repay us? By quitting?" By throwing away your future? Amanda, my father interjected weakly. Maybe we should discuss this privately after dinner. But she wasn't listening. No. I want to be very clear right now. She looked directly at me, her eyes harder than I'd ever seen them. You are not welcome at this table if you choose this path. You are not welcome in this home for holidays, birthdays, or any family gatherings until you get your act together and stop being such a disappointment. Mom, that's a bit extreme, Garrett said, but she silenced him with a look. I mean it. I will not watch you destroy your life. I will not pretend to support this failure of character. Make your choice, Wyatt. I looked to my father for support, but he stared at his plate, unwilling to challenge her. In that moment, I realized I had never truly had a choice, not in her eyes. Then I guess this is goodbye for now, I said, standing up. I looked at each of them, my furious mother, my silent father, my uncomfortable brother. Then I walked out, unsure when I would see them again. 2 weeks later, while clearing out my dorm room, an envelope arrived that would change everything. I had applied to Harvard Law months earlier, never believing I had a chance. It was a shot in the dark, a way to prove to myself that my dream was valid even if I never pursued it. I tore open the heavy envelope with the crimson Harvard seal. Dear Mr. Wilson, we are pleased to offer you admission to Harvard Law School with a full academic scholarship. I read the letter 3 times before its reality sank in. I could go to Harvard. I could become a lawyer. And I wouldn't need a dime from my parents to do it. In that moment, I made a decision that would shape the next 3 years of my life. I wouldn't tell them, not until I had succeeded. Not until I had something so undeniable that even my mother couldn't dismiss it as a mistake. If she thought I was a failure now, let her think it. One day, I would prove her wrong. January in Cambridge brought bitter cold and the isolating feeling of starting over completely alone. While other first-year law students called home with updates or had parents visiting for weekend brunches, I was untethered from my family completely. I tried calling home once, 2 weeks after moving into my small apartment near campus. My father answered, his voice cautious. Vit, are you okay? I'm fine, Dad. Actually, I'm more than fine. I have something important to tell you. I heard shuffling, then my mother's voice in the background asking who was calling. Before I could continue, my father's tone changed. Now's not a good time, son. Just give me 2 minutes. It's important. More muffled sounds, then the distinct click as my mother took the phone. Wyatt, have you reconsidered your decisions and returned to complete your business degree? No, Mom, but The line went dead. She'd hung up on me. I called back immediately, but no one answered. After 5 attempts, I gave up. An hour later, a text from my father arrived. Give her time. She's hurting too. As if I were the one causing pain rather than experiencing it. With family support clearly off the table, I threw myself into my studies with an intensity born of anger and determination. If Harvard Law was to be my new family, I would become its most devoted son. The workload was crushing. Thousands of pages of dense reading each week, the Socratic method in class that left some students in tears, and the cutthroat competition for top grades. But for once, the pressure felt purposeful. This wasn't my mother's dream imposed on me. It was my own path. By midterms, I had distinguished myself enough that Professor Landau, the notoriously difficult constitutional law teacher, actually knew my name. By finals, I had the highest grade in 3 of my 5 classes, and when first-year rankings were posted, I stood at number 6 in a class of 542. During that first year, I formed a friendship with Jordan Mitchell, a fellow student who noticed me spending Christmas break alone in the library. Don't you have somewhere to be? He asked, dropping his casebooks next to mine. Nowhere but here, I replied without elaborating. Jordan didn't push, but he did invite me to his family's home in Vermont for spring break. His parents, a high school English teacher and a carpenter, welcomed me without questions. They were warm, supportive, and proudly displayed Jordan's undergrad diploma and awards, without seeming to expect anything in return. It was my first glimpse of what unconditional family support might look like. Your folks must be proud, Jordan's mother said over dinner one night. Harvard Law is quite an achievement. They don't actually know I'm here, I admitted, surprising myself with the confession. Jordan's parents exchanged confused glances. "It's complicated," I added, not wanting to elaborate further. But later that night, sitting on the porch with Jordan, the whole story spilled out. My mother's rigid expectations, the ultimatum, the silent father, the scholarship I never told them about. "That's messed up, man," Jordan said when I finished. "But you're killing it here." Their loss. My brother Garrett stayed in minimal contact. Occasional text messages. Usually, late at night, checking if I was okay. Once, during my second year, he suggested meeting for coffee when he had a business trip to Boston. We met at a small cafe far from campus. Garrett looked successful in his tailored suit, but there was a new weariness around his eyes. "How are things at home?" I asked, after we'd covered the basics of our own lives. Garrett sighed. "Mom's the same, relentless. Now that her project with you is on hold, she's focusing all her energy on my career trajectory. Dad just tries to keep the peace." "Do they ever mention me?" He hesitated, which was answer enough. "Mom tells people you moved to California to find yourself." He winced. "Dad keeps a photo of you in his desk drawer at work. I've seen him looking at it." "And what do you tell people when they ask about your brother?" "The truth, that you're doing your own thing and we don't talk much." Not the whole truth, but not a complete lie either. Typical Garrett, navigating the middle path. As we were leaving, Garrett asked, "So what are you actually doing with yourself these days? Working somewhere?" I almost told him then. The words were on the tip of my tongue. "I'm at Harvard Law. Top of my class. Law review." Everything Mom would have wanted if she'd bothered to ask. But something held me back. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was the realization that if I told Garrett, I'd be putting him in the position of either keeping my secret from our parents or revealing it before I was ready. "I'm figuring things out," I said instead. "Making progress." By the start of my third year, I had accumulated achievements that should have made any parent burst with pride. Editor of the Harvard Law Review. Winner of the prestigious Ames Moot Court competition, and summer associate offers from the top firms in the country. The Ames win was even featured in a legal publication with a photo of our team. 3 weeks after it was published, Garrett texted, "Saw your picture in the American Bar Journal. Congrats." Impressive. My heart stopped. "You saw that?" "Yeah. Legal articles cross my desk sometimes. You didn't mention Harvard when we met. Are you going to tell Mom and Dad?" The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before his answer came. "Not my news to share, but they should hear it from you. They don't want to hear anything from me, unless it's that I've gone back to business school. Maybe things have changed, but I knew my mother. Admitting she was wrong was not in her nature. And my father never contradicted her. Not on anything that mattered. Only Aunt Patricia, my mother's younger sister, showed genuine interest in my life. She had always been different from my mother, more free-spirited, less concerned with status and appearances. When I mentioned during a phone call that I'd moved to Cambridge, she connected the dots immediately. "Harvard? Law school?" she'd asked, excitement evident in her voice. "How did you know?" "You always had that spark when you talked about law, and you wouldn't leave business school for anything less than a top program." From then on, Patricia became my one real connection to family. She sent care packages during finals, called regularly for updates, and never once suggested I was making a mistake. "Your mother is stubborn, but she loves you," Patricia would say whenever I expressed doubt about the eventual reconciliation. "She just doesn't know how to back down once she's taken a position. She doesn't know how to admit she's wrong," I corrected. "That too," Patricia agreed. "But someday, she'll have to face reality. And when that day comes, I want to be there to see her face." I didn't share her optimism, but it was nice to have someone who believed reconciliation was possible. The greatest shock came during my final semester. While researching for a paper in the law library, I came across a familiar name, Garrett Wilson, cited as a source in a business law article. Curious, I pulled up the full text and discovered my brother had been interviewed about a case involving his company. In the interview, the reporter had asked about his background. The printed response read, "I come from a family that values education. My brother is actually studying law. He knew. He'd known for some time, and he'd publicly acknowledged my path while continuing to maintain my mother's fiction at home. When confronted via text, Garrett's response was telling. What was I supposed to do? Tell Mom she's been wrong all this time? You know her. She'd just find a way to dismiss Harvard as another mistake. He was right, of course. But the realization that my own brother had been keeping my accomplishments secret to protect our mother's pride cut deeper than I expected. By the time my third and final year of law school began, my success had become almost routine. I had secured a position as editor-in-chief of the Harvard Law Review, an honor reserved for the top student in the class. My professors sought my input on their academic papers. Judge Matthews from the First Circuit Court of Appeals had personally reached out to offer me a clerkship after graduation. One of the most prestigious positions a new lawyer could hope for. What should have been a time of celebration instead highlighted the emptiness of achievement without family to share it with. When I received the law review appointment, I had no one to call except Aunt Patricia and Jordan. When other students' parents visited campus, I made myself scarce, unable to bear the reminder of what I was missing. The job offers began rolling in during the fall of my third year. Top firms from New York, Boston, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. all wanted Harvard's star student. The starting salaries were staggering. $190,000 at most of the firms, with signing bonuses of $50,000. Financial security beyond what even my mother could have hoped for. I kept a spreadsheet comparing the offers, trying to make a rational decision while knowing that what I really wanted was someone to discuss them with. Someone like my father, who would have been proud regardless of which firm I chose. Aunt Patricia's involvement in my life deepened during this time. She flew to Cambridge twice, touring the campus and beaming with pride as students and professors greeted me with respect. You've really made a place for yourself here, she said during her second visit. I'm so proud of you, Wyatt. I just wish. I started, then stopped myself. I know, she said, squeezing my hand. They should be here to see this. It's their loss. She meant it kindly, but the words stung. Because despite everything, I still wanted my parents' approval. I still checked my phone each morning, hoping for a text from my father or, miracle of miracles, my mother. I tried once more to reach out, sending a formal letter rather than calling. I wrote about my time at Harvard without mentioning the school by name, simply saying I had found my path and hoped we could reconcile. I included my new phone number and address. 2 weeks later, the letter came back unopened, stamped "Return to Sender" in my mother's unmistakable handwriting. Patricia was furious when I told her. This has gone on long enough, she said. Your graduation is in 3 months. They need to know what they're missing. They've made their choice, I said, trying to sound more resolved than I felt. Maybe it's time I accept it. But acceptance is easier said than done when it comes to family. The wound reopened unexpectedly when an ivory envelope arrived at my apartment in early April. Inside was an invitation to Garrett's wedding in June. The formal invitation was standard, addressed to Mr. Wyatt Wilson and guest. But paper-clipped to it was a handwritten note from Garrett. Would mean a lot to have you there. Mom doesn't need to know you're coming. We can work around it. My own brother was inviting me to his wedding, as if I were some shameful secret, someone to be hidden from our mother rather than celebrated as family. I called him immediately. What exactly is the plan here, Garrett? I hide in the church balcony? Duck behind potted plants at the reception whenever Mom walks by? I thought you'd want to be there, he said defensively. Of course I want to be there. But not like this. Not sneaking around like I've done something wrong. Look, I'm caught in the middle here. I want my brother at my wedding, but Mom will cause a scene if she knows in advance. I thought this was a good compromise. A good compromise, I repeated flatly. Do you have any idea what it's like to be erased from your own family? To have your mother pretend you don't exist because you chose a different path than the one she prescribed? Vet. No, listen. I will come to your wedding. Because you're my brother, and I love you. But I will not hide. I will not pretend to be someone else or sneak in the back door. I will show up as myself. And if that causes a scene, that's on Mom, not me. The line was silent for a long moment. Okay, he finally said. You're right. I'm sorry. Come as yourself. I did attend Garrett's wedding. walking into the church with my head held high. The ceremony was beautiful, the bride lovely. Mutual friends from childhood greeted me warmly, asking what I'd been up to. I answered honestly, but vaguely, not wanting to distract from my brother's day. My mother saw me just before the ceremony began. Her eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in anger. She started toward me, but my father caught her arm, whispering something in her ear. She remained in her seat, back rigid, eyes forward. At the reception, I approached them at their table. "Congratulations," I said simply. "Garrett and Lisa make a beautiful couple." My father half rose, as if to embrace me, but my mother's hand on his arm stopped him. "Thank you for coming," she said coldly, as if I were a distant acquaintance rather than her son. I extended my hand. After a moment's hesitation, she took it briefly, her grip limp and unwelcoming. "It's good to see you, Wyatt," my father said, his eyes communicating what his words could not. "You too, Dad." I turned to leave, but my mother's voice stopped me. "I hear you've been getting help for your issues." I turned back slowly. "What issues would those be, Mom? There's no need to be embarrassed. Addiction is a disease. We've told everyone how proud we are that you've been seeking treatment." The realization hit me like a physical blow. She'd been telling people I was in rehab. That was her explanation for my absence from family functions for the past 3 years. "I'm not in rehab, Mom. I've never had addiction issues." "Of course," she said with a tight smile. "That's good to hear. I hope things are going well for you, whatever you're doing now." The dismissal was clear. I nodded to my father and walked away, anger and hurt burning in my chest. It wasn't enough that she had cut me out of family events. She had created a fictional version of me, a troubled addict, rather than admit I had simply chosen a different path than the one she demanded. That night in my hotel room, I called Aunt Patricia. "She's telling people I'm a recovering addict," I said without preamble. Patricia sighed heavily. "I know. I've tried to correct the record whenever I can, but Amanda is persuasive. People believe her. Why would she do that? Why not just say I moved away or we had a falling out? Because that would require admitting that you made a choice she disagreed with. This way, you're sick. You're not responsible for your actions." And she gets to play the long-suffering mother supporting her troubled son from afar. The explanation made a horrible kind of sense. My mother had always needed to be right. If I wasn't following her plan, there had to be something wrong with me. It couldn't possibly be that her plan was flawed. "I graduate in 2 months," I said. "Top of my class. Editor of the Law Review. Multiple job offers." "I know, sweetie. I'm so proud of you. I want them to know too. Not because I need their approval anymore, but because I need them to see me as I really am. Not some fictional addict. Not a failure. Not a disappointment. Just me, Wyatt. Making my own way." "Then let's make sure they find out," Patricia said, determination in her voice. "I have an idea." May brought perfect New England weather and the culmination of 3 years of intensive work. Graduation day at Harvard Law School is a spectacle of tradition. Students in black robes with crimson hoods, faculty in their academic regalia, proud families clutching programs and flowers. I stood among my classmates feeling both triumphant and hollow. I had achieved everything I set out to do. Summa cum laude, highest honors, job secured at Blackwell and Hayes, one of Boston's most prestigious firms. Yet as names were called and jubilant graduates waved to cheering family members, I had no one in the audience who shared my last name. Jordan's parents had come, sitting with Aunt Patricia and holding a spot for me at their post-ceremony lunch. They'd even brought a gift, a beautiful leather briefcase with my initials embossed on the nameplate. It was thoughtful and perfect. It was also a painful reminder that strangers had shown me more support than my own parents. "We're so proud of you, Wyatt," Jordan's mother said, hugging me tightly after the ceremony. "You've accomplished something extraordinary." I thanked her sincerely, fighting the lump in my throat. Over her shoulder, I could see other graduates introducing their friends to their parents, siblings taking photos, grandparents wiping away tears of pride. Patricia noticed my expression and squeezed my arm. "They should be here," she said quietly. "It's fine," I lied. "I'm used to it." But the truth was, I would never get used to it. Some wounds don't heal. You just learn to function despite them. Back in my apartment that evening, diploma in hand, I allowed myself a moment of genuine pride. I had done this on my own, without financial support or emotional backing from my parents. I had proven to myself what I was capable of, even if they would never acknowledge it. My phone rang, Garrett calling to check in. How was graduation? Good. Strange. Bittersweet. I can imagine. Listen, I've been thinking. It might be time to tell Mom and Dad about Harvard. You've proven your point. You succeeded on your own terms. I laughed without humor. My point? This wasn't about making a point, Garrett. This was about following my own path even when everyone I loved tried to force me down a different one. I know, but do you? Because you've always been the golden child. You've always done exactly what was expected. You have no idea what it's like to have your own mother disown you for having the audacity to make your own choices. A long silence followed. Then, you're right. I don't know what that's like. I'm sorry. The sincerity in his voice deflated my anger. I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have snapped at you. So what now? Are you going to tell them? I sighed. I don't know. Part of me wants to show up at their door with my diploma and transcript and say, "See? I didn't fail. I succeeded beyond your wildest expectations." But another part thinks, what's the point? Mom will just find a way to make my success about her or dismiss Harvard Law as inferior to the business career she planned for me. Maybe. Or maybe she'll surprise you. I doubted it, but didn't say so. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and contemplated my options. I could continue as I had been, building my life separately from my family. I could make a grand revelation, forcing them to acknowledge my achievements. Or I could try a more subtle approach, opening the door to reconciliation without confrontation. I was still weighing these options when Patricia called the following week with news that shifted my perspective. "Your father called me," she said without preamble. "He wants to meet for coffee." "Why?" I asked, immediately suspicious. "He didn't say exactly, but he mentioned that he and your mother have been having difficulties. I think he's reaching out because he's lonely." My father, lonely, the concept was foreign. He and my mother had been inseparable for as long as I could remember, a united front, especially when it came to parenting decisions. "What kind of difficulties?" He wouldn't elaborate. Just said that your mother's rigidity has been taking a toll. He asked about you, though. Wanted to know how you were doing. What did you tell him? That you're doing extremely well, but that it's not my place to share the details. That he should ask you directly. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache forming. And how did he respond to that? He said he'd like to, but isn't sure you'd take his call. The sad truth was, I probably would have ignored a call from my father, assuming my mother had put him up to it. 3 years of silence had taught me to protect myself from further rejection. "Maybe you should call him," Patricia suggested gently. He sounded different, more open. I promised to consider it, but days passed without action. I was busy preparing for the bar exam and finalizing details for my move to a new apartment closer to the firm. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The reality was, I was afraid of hoping for reconciliation only to be hurt again. Finally, on a rainy Tuesday evening, I dialed my parents' number before I could talk myself out of it. My father answered on the second ring. "Hello? Dad, it's Wyatt." The silence that followed was so long I thought we'd been disconnected. "Wyatt," he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's good to hear from you, son." We talked for nearly an hour, careful, halting conversation at first, then gradually more natural. He told me about his work, neighborhood changes, Garrett's new job. I shared vague details about my life, still reluctant to reveal Harvard. Then he said something that caught me off guard. "Your mother isn't home tonight. Garden club meeting. That's why I can talk freely." "You need to hide your conversations with me from Mom?" I asked, hurt despite myself. He sighed heavily. "It's complicated, Wyatt. Your mother has strong feelings about your decisions. Mentioning you tends to trigger arguments. About how I'm such a failure and disappointment? She's stuck in her perspective. You know how she gets when she believes she's right." I did know. My mother's certainty was her defining characteristic. Immovable, unquestionable, absolute. Has it occurred to you, Dad, that she might be wrong? that I might have made the right choice for myself? Another long silence. I've considered that possibility more and more lately, he admitted. Especially since her attitude has affected other relationships. Meaning? Meaning our marriage isn't what it used to be. I love your mother, Wyatt. But her inability to adapt or admit mistakes has created distance between us. It was the most honest my father had ever been about his relationship with my mother. For a man who had spent decades deferring to her judgment, it represented a seismic shift. I miss you, son, he added quietly. I should have stood up for you 3 years ago. I'm sorry I didn't. The apology, so long awaited, both soothed and stung. Thank you for saying that. Thanksgiving is next month, he said tentatively. Would you consider coming home? Your mother would need some preparation. But I think it's time this family healed. Before I could answer, I heard a door close in the background, and my father's tone changed abruptly. Yes, that's right. Tuesday delivery is fine. Thank you. Then, barely audible. Your mother's home. Think about Thanksgiving. Please. The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone, emotions swirling. My father wanted reconciliation but still couldn't stand up to my mother directly. Some things hadn't changed. I called Patricia immediately to discuss the invitation. Thanksgiving, she repeated thoughtfully. That's either brilliant or disastrous, depending on how Amanda reacts. Dad says he'll prepare her, whatever that means. Well, if you do go, I think it's time for the big reveal. No more hiding Harvard. No more letting Amanda control the narrative. And how exactly do you suggest doing that? Showing up in my Harvard sweatshirt? Working legal terminology into dinner conversation until someone figures it out? Patricia laughed. Actually, I have a more dramatic idea. Something that can't be ignored or dismissed. She outlined her plan. Simple, but potentially explosive. She would bring my framed diploma and transcripts to Thanksgiving dinner as her contribution. She would present them at the right moment, ensuring maximum impact. It's theatrical, I admitted. But what if it backfires? What if it just makes things worse? What could be worse than the current situation? Your mother telling people you're a recovering addict? Your father having to hide conversations with his own son? You being excluded from family events? Sometimes you need a dramatic gesture to break through denial this deep. She had a point. 3 years of silence and separation hadn't resolved anything. Maybe it was time for a different approach. As Patricia continued outlining her plan, I received a text from Garrett. Heard Dad invited you for Thanksgiving. Mom's been having stress. Related health issues. Blood pressure? Anxiety? Just for your information, before you decide. I stared at the message, feeling manipulated. Was this a genuine health concern, or another attempt to control my behavior through guilt? I forwarded the text to Patricia. Classic Amanda, she said after reading it. When logic fails, health concerns appear. I've seen this pattern my entire life. Her conditions always seem to flare up when she's not getting her way. But what if it's legitimate? What if my showing up and revealing Harvard causes a genuine health crisis? Patricia's voice softened. Wyatt, you are not responsible for your mother's emotional reactions or her health. You have lived your life with integrity, making choices that were right for you. If the truth about your success causes her distress, that's about her inability to accept reality, not about your choices. I knew she was right. But years of conditioning had taught me to consider my mother's feelings above my own. It took another week of internal debate before I made my decision. I'll be there for Thanksgiving, I told my father when I finally called back. But I'm coming as myself, Dad. No pretending. No hiding who I've become. Of course, he said, relief evident in his voice. That's all I want. My son. As he is. I wasn't sure he understood what I meant, but I didn't elaborate. Some revelations were better delivered in person. The week before Thanksgiving, I found myself standing in a frame shop in Boston, watching as my Harvard Law diploma was mounted in an elegant frame with UV protective glass. The crimson and black of the Harvard seal stood out prominently against the creamy parchment, the Latin text declaring my achievement to the world. Special occasion? The framer asked as he wrapped the finished piece. Family reunion, I answered. a complex mix of anxiety and determination settling in my stomach. Long overdue. The drive from Boston to my parents' home in Connecticut typically takes 2 hours. On Thanksgiving morning, I stretched it to 3, stopping frequently to calm my nerves and rehearse what I might say when face to face with my mother for the first time in years. Aunt Patricia had called that morning, confirming our plan. I'll arrive around 4, just before dinner. The diploma is wrapped and ready. You just focus on keeping your cool until then. Keeping my cool. Easier said than done when confronting the woman who had dismissed me as a failure, spread rumors about fictional addiction problems, and cut me out of family life for the crime of choosing my own path. I pulled into the familiar neighborhood around 2 o'clock. The houses were decorated for the holiday. Harvest wreaths, pumpkin displays, the occasional early Christmas light. My parents' home looked exactly as I remembered it. Immaculate lawn, despite the November chill, symmetrical shrubs, fresh paint on the shutters. Perfect on the outside, regardless of what tensions might exist within. Taking a deep breath, I approached the front door and rang the bell. My father answered almost immediately, as if he'd been waiting nearby. "Wyatt," he said, relief and happiness mingling in his expression. "You came." He pulled me into an awkward hug. Physical affection had never been his strong suit, and ushered me inside. The house smelled of roasting turkey and sage stuffing, my mother's traditional menu unchanged. "Where's Mom?" I asked, scanning the immaculate living room. "Kitchen. Well, she knows you're coming. We've talked about it extensively. And she's agreed to be civil." Civil. The bar was set so low it was practically on the ground. "Garrett and Lisa are already here. And your cousins are coming. Michael and his wife, and Jessica with her new boyfriend." I nodded, mentally preparing for the social dynamics ahead. Garrett would be supportive but careful not to anger our mother. The cousins would be curious but hesitant to ask direct questions. And my mother would be civil, the faintest of praise. "Let's get this over with," I said, moving toward the kitchen. My mother stood at the island, expertly crimping the edge of a pie crust. She looked older than I remembered, new lines etched around her mouth and eyes. She looked up as we entered, her hands never stopping their practiced movement. "Wyatt," she said, her tone neutral. "You're here." "I'm here," I confirmed, standing awkwardly in the doorway. "Hello, Mom." She nodded once, returning her attention to the pie. "Dinner's at 4. Garrett and Lisa are in the den if you want to join them." No hug. No questions about my life. Not even a comment on my appearance. Just a dismissive redirection to another room. My father gave me an apologetic look, but said nothing to counter her coldness. I found Garrett and his wife in the den, watching the Thanksgiving Day parade. My brother leapt up when he saw me. "Wyatt! You made it." He embraced me with genuine warmth. "It's been too long, man." Lisa hugged me too, her smile sincere. "It's so good to see you again. Garrett talks about you all the time." We made small talk, carefully avoiding any mention of my career or education. I caught Garrett shooting warning glances at Lisa whenever she veered too close to asking about my life in Boston. "It's okay," I told him quietly when Lisa stepped out to use the bathroom. "I'm not hiding anything today. Patricia's bringing the proof at 4. Garrett's eyes widened. "The Harvard diploma? You're going to show it to Mom today?" "That's the plan." "Think she'll still call me a failure when she sees Harvard Law School with her own eyes?" He looked nervous. "I don't know, Wyatt. Mom's been tense lately. Dad said..." Her doctor increased her blood pressure medication. "Are you suggesting I continue to let her believe I'm a dropout or an addict rather than risk upsetting her? Because I've spent 3 years being erased from this family, and I'm done with it." Garrett raised his hands in surrender. "I get it. I do. I want this to go well. I want our family back together." "So do I. But not if it means denying who I am or what I've accomplished." The conversation ended as cousins began arriving, bringing the usual holiday chaos of greetings, food contributions, and catching up. My cousin Jessica hugged me tightly. "The prodigal returns," she said with a smile. "It's been forever. What have you been up to?" Before I could answer, my mother appeared in the doorway. "Jessica." Would you help me with the cranberry sauce? Lisa is setting the dining room table, and Michael's wife is arranging the appetizers. Jessica gave me an apologetic look and followed my mother to the kitchen. The pattern continued for the next hour. Anytime someone began asking me substantive questions about my life, my mother would appear with a task that needed immediate attention from that person. It was subtle but effective, ensuring I remained an unexamined presence, neither fully acknowledged nor directly snubbed. By the time we gathered around the table, the tension was palpable. I sat between my father and cousin Michael, directly across from my mother. She had arranged the seating, no doubt strategically placing me where she could keep an eye on me without having to engage directly. "Where's Aunt Patricia?" I asked as my father began carving the turkey. "Shouldn't we wait for her?" "She texted she's running late," my mother replied, her tone suggesting this was typical and inconvenient. "We'll start without her." The food was passed, plates were filled, and conversation flowed around me. I participated minimally, watching my mother control the room with practiced skill. She directed discussions toward safe topics. Michael's promotion, Jessica's graduate program, Garrett and Lisa's new home. When my father asked me about my apartment in Boston, my mother smoothly interrupted. "Lisa, tell everyone about your plans for the guest bedroom. Didn't you mention a complete renovation?" I caught my father's eye across the table. He looked away, unwilling or unable to challenge the dynamic. Some things truly hadn't changed. As we finished the main course, my mother rose to bring out the pies. In her absence, my father leaned toward me. "Give her time, Wyatt. This is a big step for her. Having you here at all. A big step would be actually acknowledging my existence, Dad, or not changing the subject every time someone asks about my life. She's trying, in her way. Her way isn't good enough anymore." The doorbell rang, saving my father from having to respond. "That'll be Patricia," he said, rising to answer the door. My mother returned with the pies just as Aunt Patricia entered the dining room, carrying a large, flat package wrapped in festive paper and topped with a bow. "Sorry I'm late," Patricia announced cheerfully. "Traffic was terrible. But I brought something special." My mother eyed the package suspiciously. "You didn't need to bring anything, Patricia. I told you I had dessert covered." "Oh, this isn't food," Patricia replied, winking at me. "This is something much more meaningful. A surprise for the whole family, but especially for you, Amanda." The room grew quiet, everyone sensing the undercurrent of tension. My mother's expression tightened as she set the pies on the sideboard. "Well, let's see it then," she said with forced politeness. Patricia placed the package on the cleared space at the center of the table. "Before I open this, I want to make a toast," she announced, raising her wine glass. "To family, to reconciliation, and to celebrating each other's achievements, even when they take unexpected forms." My mother's eyes narrowed, suspicion clearly growing. My father looked nervous, while Garrett and the cousins appeared confused, but intrigued. "I'd like to make a toast as well," my mother said suddenly, rising from her chair. All eyes turned to her as she lifted her water glass. "To family who uphold our values, to children who respect their parents' wisdom, and to the importance of completing what you start, rather than abandoning responsibilities on a whim." The words were aimed directly at me, a public reminder of my perceived failure. My cheeks burned as I felt everyone's attention shift uncomfortably between my mother and me. I nearly stood up to leave right then. The only thing that stopped me was Patricia's hand on my arm, and the knowledge that my diploma was sitting in that wrapped package, ready to rewrite the narrative my mother had been controlling for 3 years. "Shall we open the gift now?" Patricia asked, her voice deliberately light but her eyes steely. "Of course," my mother replied with a tight smile. "Let's see what was so important it couldn't wait until after dessert." Patricia began unwrapping the package with deliberate slowness, building anticipation. "Amanda, you've always valued education and achievement," she said conversationally. "You've always wanted the best for your sons." "I have," my mother agreed, suspicion still evident in her tone. "And you've always taught them that actions have consequences, that choices determine futures." "Precisely." Patricia removed the last of the wrapping paper, keeping the framed diploma facing away from the table so only she could see it. "Then I think you'll find this particularly meaningful." With a dramatic flourish, she turned the frame around, revealing the crimson and black Harvard Law School diploma with my name prominently displayed. For a moment, absolute silence filled the room. Every eye moved from the diploma to my mother, whose face had gone completely blank with shock. "That's not real," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "I assure you it is," Patricia replied. "Wyatt graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Law School 6 months ago. He was editor of the Harvard Law Review. He had his choice of top firms and accepted a position at Blackwell and Hayes in Boston." My mother's eyes snapped to mine, disbelief battling with confusion. "This isn't possible. You dropped out. You walked away from college." "I dropped out of business school," I corrected, finding my voice at last. "Because I discovered my passion for law. I applied to Harvard, was accepted with a full scholarship, and graduated at the top of my class. While you were telling people I was in rehab or finding myself in California, I was earning a degree from the most prestigious law school in the country." Garrett let out a low whistle. "Holy shit, bro. Harvard Law? Top of your class?" My cousins began exclaiming in impressed tones, Jessica bouncing in her seat with excitement, Michael asking about Harvard's campus. My father stared at the diploma with tears forming in his eyes. But my mother remained frozen, her face unreadable. "Say something, Amanda," Patricia prompted gently. My mother stood abruptly, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. Without a word, she turned and walked out of the dining room. Seconds later, we heard a door slam upstairs. The room erupted in confused chatter. My father rose to follow my mother, but Patricia stopped him. "Give her a minute, Thomas. This is a shock." "You knew about this?" he asked her, hurt evident in his voice. "All this time?" "Yes," Patricia admitted. "Wyatt swore me to secrecy until he graduated. He wanted to prove himself on his own terms." My father turned to me, conflicting emotions crossing his face. Pride, confusion, hurt. "You should have told us, son. Would it have made a difference?" I asked quietly. "Would Mom have welcomed me back if she knew I was at Harvard but not following her specific plan for my life?" He had no answer for that, which was answer enough. "I think I should go," I said, rising from my chair. The revelation hadn't brought the satisfaction I'd expected, only a hollow feeling and the confirmation that even Harvard Law couldn't bridge the gulf my mother had created. "No," Garrett said firmly. "You shouldn't have to leave. This is your family too." "Garrett's right," my cousin Michael added. "Stay. Mom will come around." But I knew my mother better than they did. She wouldn't come around, at least not quickly, and not without a direct confrontation that I wasn't sure I had the energy for anymore. "I'll go talk to her," my father said, heading for the stairs. As the family continued to examine my diploma and pepper me with questions I only half answered, I watched my father disappear upstairs, wondering what he could possibly say to bridge the chasm of pride and hurt between my mother and me. 20 minutes passed, and neither my father nor mother had returned from upstairs. The initial excitement over my Harvard revelation had given way to awkward concern, with family members exchanging glances and checking their watches. "Maybe I should check on them," Garrett suggested, half rising from his chair. "No," I said firmly. "This is between Mom and me. I'll go." Before I could change my mind, I headed upstairs, my heart pounding with each step. I knew which room my mother would be in. Her bedroom had always been her refuge during family conflicts. Standing outside the closed door, I could hear muffled voices, my father's gentle murmur and my mother's sharper tones. I knocked lightly. "Mom? Dad? It's me. Can I come in?" The voices stopped. After a long pause, my father called, "Come in, Wyatt." I opened the door to find my mother sitting rigidly on the edge of the bed, my father beside her with a hand on her shoulder. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry, her posture defensive. My father looked exhausted, the lines in his face deeper than I'd ever seen them. "I think we need to talk," I said, closing the door behind me. "All three of us." "What is there to talk about?" my mother asked, her voice brittle. "You've made your triumphant return, complete with dramatic reveal. Congratulations, Harvard Law. Very impressive." The words should have been complimentary, but her tone made them sound like an accusation. "This wasn't about being impressive, Mom. This was about living my own life, following my own path." While deliberately excluding us, my father added quietly, "That's the part I'm struggling with, Wyatt. Why keep it a secret? Why not tell us once you were accepted? I leaned against the dresser, suddenly tired. Would you have believed me? Would you have supported me? Of course, my father started, but my mother interrupted. You know my feelings about law school. We discussed this extensively. No, Mom, we didn't discuss anything. You dictated what my future should be, and when I disagreed, you cut me out of the family. She flinched slightly but rallied. I did what I thought was best. I was trying to protect you from making a mistake. Harvard Law was a mistake? I asked incredulously. One of the most prestigious educational institutions in the world was a mistake? The timing was a mistake. Dropping out of your undergraduate program was a mistake. Refusing to consult your parents about major life decisions was a mistake. I shook my head, amazed at her ability to reframe reality. Do you hear yourself? You're still trying to control the narrative. You're still trying to make me wrong, even when I've achieved something extraordinary. Amanda, my father interjected gently. Wyatt has done something remarkable. Can't we acknowledge that before addressing anything else? My mother stood and walked to the window, her back to us. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then she turned, her expression inscrutable. Why didn't you tell us? She asked. And for the first time, I heard genuine hurt beneath the anger. Why exclude us from such an important part of your life? The question caught me off guard. I had prepared for continued criticism, not vulnerability. Because you made it clear that I was only welcome in this family if I followed your exact blueprint. I replied honestly. You didn't leave room for compromise or discussion. It was your way or nothing. So you chose nothing, she said quietly. No, Mom. You chose nothing. I chose Harvard. I chose law. I chose my own path. You're the one who decided. That meant I couldn't be part of this family anymore. My father stood and moved between us, physically bridging the gap. Let's focus on now, not the past. Wyatt has graduated from Harvard Law School. He has a prestigious job in Boston. These are facts we can all agree on, yes? My mother nodded reluctantly. And Amanda, can we also agree that regardless of how we got here, having our son estranged from the family is not what anyone wants moving forward? She hesitated, then nodded again. Good, my father continued with more authority than I'd heard from him in years. Then what matters now is how we rebuild from here. Not assigning blame, not rehashing old arguments, moving forward as a family. My mother turned back to the window, her shoulders tense. How am I supposed to face everyone downstairs? She asked. And I realized part of her reaction was simple embarrassment. For 3 years, she had maintained a fiction about my life, and now that fiction had been publicly shattered. You tell them the truth, I said simply. That we had a disagreement about my educational path, that you didn't know about Harvard because we weren't in communication, that you're proud of what I've accomplished, even if it wasn't what you initially envisioned for me. My father nodded encouragingly. That's reasonable, Amanda. No one downstairs is judging you. They're just happy the family might be reconciling. Patricia is judging me, my mother muttered. She orchestrated this whole scene to embarrass me. She orchestrated it because she loves both of us, I countered, and because 3 years of estrangement was enough. A soft knock at the door interrupted us. Everything okay in there? Patricia called. People are wondering about dessert. My mother squared her shoulders and moved to the door with renewed composure. We're fine, she said, opening it to face her sister. Just having a long overdue family discussion. Patricia looked past her to me, raising an eyebrow in silent question. I gave her a small nod, not fixed, but progress. Well, don't discuss too long, Patricia said lightly. Lisa's already eyeing the pumpkin pie, and I don't think I can hold her off much longer. The attempt at normalcy seemed to steady my mother. Tell everyone we'll be down in 5 minutes. And, Patricia, we'll talk later about your flair for dramatic reveals. Patricia grinned unrepentantly, looking forward to it. After she left, my mother turned back to face us. I need a moment to collect myself. Thomas, you and Wyatt go downstairs. I'll join you shortly. My father looked uncertain. Are you sure, Amanda? Yes, go. I followed my father downstairs, not entirely convinced my mother would actually rejoin the gathering. When she did appear 10 minutes later, her hair freshly combed and makeup retouched, she carried herself with the dignified composure that had always been her hallmark. "I believe I promised dessert," she announced to the room, moving toward the pies, as if nothing unusual had occurred. But as she passed my chair, she briefly touched my shoulder, the first voluntary contact she had initiated in 3 years. The rest of the evening proceeded with a strange blend of normalcy and underlying tension. My mother didn't make any grand announcements or apologies, but she no longer prevented conversations about my life and career. When my cousin Jessica asked about my job at Blackwell and Hayes, my mother remained at the table, listening with an unreadable expression. As the gathering began to break up, with cousins making their departures amid promises to stay in touch, my mother approached me in a quiet moment. "Your diploma," she said, nodding toward the frame Patricia had propped on the sideboard. "It's very impressive." "Thank you," I replied, unsure what else to say. "I saved the newspaper clippings," she added abruptly, "from the law review announcement. And your moot court competition. Your photograph was quite distinguished." I stared at her, processing this revelation. "You knew? All this time?" She looked away. "I suspected. Garrett mentioned seeing your name in a legal journal last year. I looked into it. You knew I was at Harvard Law and still maintained the fiction that I was a dropout? Or worse, an addict?" Anger flared again, hot and immediate. "I didn't know how to reverse course," she admitted quietly. "I'd taken such a firm position. And you never reached out to tell me directly." "I tried. Multiple times. You returned my letters unopened. You hung up on me when I called." "Yes." The simple acknowledgement surprised me. I was wrong about that. I was too rigid. Coming from my mother, this was tantamount to a full apology and confession of sins. I felt some of my anger dissipate, replaced by cautious hope. "So where do we go from here?" I asked. She straightened her shoulders. "I would like to visit your office in Boston. See where you work. Perhaps have lunch, if you're amenable." It wasn't the warm reconciliation some might have hoped for, but from my mother, it was a significant olive branch. "I'd like that," I said. "My apartment has a guest room, if you and Dad want to stay overnight." "One step at a time, Wyatt," she replied, but her tone lacked its usual sharpness. "One step at a time." As I prepared to leave later that evening, my father hugged me properly, holding on longer than usual. "I'm so proud of you, son. Not just Harvard, though that's incredible, but for standing your ground. For finding your own way." "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot." My mother stood beside him, offering her cheek for a kiss. "Goodbye. Drive safely. Let us know when you arrive home." "I will." As I turned to go, she added, "Perhaps Christmas dinner here, if your schedule permits?" I looked back at her, standing in the doorway of the home I'd been barred from for 3 years. "I'd like that," I said. "I'll be there." The drive back to Boston that night felt different from the tense journey of the morning. Nothing had been fully resolved. 3 years of hurt couldn't be healed in a single evening, but a door had been opened. A possibility created. My phone buzzed with a text as I parked outside my apartment building. It was from Aunt Patricia. "You okay? That was quite a dinner." "I'm okay," I replied. "Not fixed, but a start." "Your mother called me," she texted back. "First time in months. Said she's coming to Boston to see your office. Progress?" "Definitely progress," I agreed. "Thank you for today. For everything." What are aunts for if not dramatic family interventions? I smiled, picturing her mischievous expression. As I entered my apartment, I noticed my Harvard diploma was missing from its usual spot on the wall, packed for Patricia's Thanksgiving reveal. The empty space seemed symbolic somehow, a reminder that while credentials and achievements matter, it's the human connections that truly define us. For the first time in years, I fell asleep thinking of my family, not with anger or hurt, but with cautious hope. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Reconciliation, I discovered, is not a single event, but a process. Often messy, sometimes painful, occasionally beautiful. My mother did visit my office in Boston the following month, arriving with my father for a carefully orchestrated day trip. She wore her business lunch outfit, a navy suit that signaled both respect and emotional distance. As I showed her around Blackwell and Hayes, introducing her to colleagues and pointing out the corner office I would earn if I made partner, I watched her eyes take in every detail. "Very impressive," she said more than once, the same phrase she'd used about my diploma. But this time, there was no bitter undertone, just a growing recognition that I had built something substantial without her guidance. At lunch, she asked detailed questions about my cases, my responsibilities, my future prospects. For the first time, she listened without interrupting, without redirecting, without imposing her viewpoint. When I mentioned a high-profile case the firm was handling, her eyes lit up with genuine interest. "You always were good at arguing a position," she noted, the closest thing to acknowledgement of my natural aptitude for law. Christmas brought another milestone. I arrived at my parents' home to find my Harvard diploma hanging prominently in the living room, alongside Garrett's Yale degree. When I raised an eyebrow at this display, my mother simply said, "It belongs with the family accomplishments." Small steps. Gradual thawing. The careful reconstruction of trust. On both sides. Case 2, Peace, PC, Just, 2, all, 2, small steps. Gradual thawing. You, 2. By spring, my mother had begun occasionally calling me for legal opinions. First on minor matters like a neighbor's property line dispute, then on more substantial issues. Each call represented another brick in the bridge we were building between us. "Your perspective is valuable," she said after one such conversation, the words clearly difficult for her to express. "You see angles I miss." From my mother, this was high praise indeed. My father flourished as the family dynamics shifted, standing taller, speaking more freely. During a weekend visit in April, he confided that my mother had started therapy. To work on her rigidity, he explained. Her need to control outcomes. "Voluntarily?" I asked, skeptical. After her doctor linked her blood pressure issues to stress and anxiety, yes, it was medically indicated. He smiled wryly. That made it acceptable to her. A doctor's prescription rather than an admission of fault. The greatest revelation came a year after that fateful Thanksgiving, when my mother called with unexpected news. "I'm returning to school," she announced without preamble, "for a master's in healthcare administration." "Mom, that's wonderful," I said, genuinely surprised. "What prompted this?" A long pause. "Watching you follow your passion, despite opposition. It made me reconsider some of my own compromises." I sat with that for a moment, recognizing the enormity of what she was sharing. "You'll be excellent. The medical office practically runs itself because of your systems already." "That's kind of you to say," she replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I've registered for fall classes. Your father is being very supportive." What she didn't say, but I understood, was that she was finally pursuing the dream she had abandoned decades ago. Not medical school, but adjacent to it. A path that connected to her original passion while acknowledging her current reality. My own career progressed rapidly. By my second year at Blackwell and Hayes, I was handling major corporate cases and being groomed for early partnership. The work was challenging and fulfilling, everything I had hoped for when I chose law over business. But the most meaningful project came from an unexpected direction. During a pro bono week at the firm, I represented a student fighting for financial aid after changing majors against his parents' wishes. The case struck close to home, and after winning it, I found myself thinking about others in similar situations. With the firm's blessing, I established a small foundation providing scholarships to students pursuing non-traditional education paths, especially those without family support. We named it the Pathfinder Scholarship, and I personally reviewed applications each year, looking for that combination of passion, determination, and independence that I recognized from my own journey. My mother's reaction to the foundation surprised me. Rather than seeing it as a rebuke of her past behavior, she offered to serve on the selection committee. "I've gained some perspective on alternate paths," she said simply. "Perhaps my experience could be valuable." 2 years after our reconciliation, at a family gathering celebrating my parents' anniversary, my mother took me aside for a rare private conversation. "I owe you an apology," she said, looking uncomfortable but determined. A real one, not the half acknowledgments I've offered previously. Mom, it's okay. We've moved past it. No, it needs to be said. She squared her shoulders. Ever the proper New Englander. Even in emotional moments. I was wrong to cut you out of the family. Wrong to control your educational choices. Wrong to spread misinformation about you rather than admit my mistake. I was rigid and fearful, and I hurt you deeply in the process. The directness of her apology left me momentarily speechless. My therapist says I tried to live through my children because I had surrendered my own ambitions, she continued. That I needed to control your outcomes because I had abandoned control of my own. That makes sense, I said carefully. It explains my behavior, but doesn't excuse it. She met my eyes directly. I am proud of you, Wyatt. Not because of Harvard, though that's certainly impressive, but because you had the courage to follow your own path. Something I never did, until recently. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Thank you for saying that. It means a lot. Your scholarship foundation. It's going to help many young people stand their ground when facing pressure like I applied to you. That's a powerful legacy. She offered her hand formally, and I took it, then pulled her into a proper hug, the kind she rarely initiated but sometimes accepted. To my surprise, she hugged back tightly. We're okay, Mom, I murmured. We made it through. Yes, she agreed, stepping back and straightening her jacket. We did. 3 Thanksgivings after the diploma revelation, our expanded family gathered around my parents' table, Garrett and Lisa with their new baby, cousins with partners, Aunt Patricia with her customary mischievous smile, and me with Jordan, now my closest friend and colleague at the firm. As my father carved the turkey, my mother stood to offer a toast. To paths taken and lessons learned, she said, raising her glass. To the courage to forge your own way and the wisdom to respect others' journeys. To family, not as we demand it to be, but as it truly is. We raised our glasses, the fractured family now mended in new patterns, stronger at the broken places. Later that evening, as guests departed and my parents prepared for bed, I found myself alone in the living room, looking at the family photos arranged on the mantel. Among them stood a new addition, a framed news article about the Pathfinder Scholarship's first recipients, with a photo of me presenting the award. My mother had placed it there, alongside the diplomas, and wedding photos, and baby announcements, equal status in the family narrative. I've learned that true success isn't measured by degrees or job titles, though those have their place. It's not even measured by family approval, though reconciliation is sweet when it comes. True success is the integrity to follow your authentic path, the courage to stand your ground when facing opposition, and the grace to leave the door open for reconnection, even after deep hurt. I don't regret my journey, not even the painful years of estrangement. Those years taught me self-reliance and clarity about my own values. They forced me to succeed on my own terms, not for external validation, but for personal fulfillment. And most importantly, they taught me that sometimes the greatest act of love for your family is the refusal to be less than who you truly are. By standing firm in my authentic self, I ultimately gave my mother the freedom to rediscover hers. That's a lesson worth every difficult step of the journey. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own path? How did you navigate that challenging terrain? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it with others who might find comfort in knowing they're not alone in these complex family dynamics. Thank you for listening, and I wish you courage on your own authentic journey, whatever form it takes.